Hi everybody, I'm Susan Gray, your host for this edition of Book Talk. Today we're talking with Jilliane Hoffman about her new book, Retribution. Welcome Jilliane, and thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Jilliane has some incredible credentials for writing thrillers, and I want you guys to know what they are, so here it is. While serving as state assistant attorney in Miami, she spent years dealing directly with the victims of the most horrifying crimes of violence and prosecuting the criminals who committed those crimes. Later, as the regional legal advisor to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the state equivalent of the FBI, she advised special agents on numerous matters in complex investigations, both criminal and civil, including homicide cases, crimes against children, violent crimes, etc., etc. Hoffman helped write Florida's public notification laws regarding sexual predators and trained the judiciary, the Department of Corrections, and virtually every South Florida police department on how to prosecute sexual offenders under these laws. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Hoffman's experiences as both a prosecutor and then police attorney gave her an insight that other criminal attorneys are rarely afforded, an intimate view of the criminal justice process, from cultivating a suspect in a major investigation to prosecuting him or her through judgment and sentence. And now she brings those experiences to bear in one of the most eagerly anticipated first novels in recent history. And I'm not telling you where she lives or where her family is, because that's just the whole thing. Okay, Jilliane, before we talk about Retribution, I want to talk to you about your background. I understand you worked on the Johnny Versace, Andrew Cunanan.
Yes, I was the regional legal counsel for FDLE at the time, and we knew a few minutes after the bullet hit him that he was down. So that was pretty wild. It was an intense time because it was about an hour and a half before we found the truck, and we knew definitively that it was Cunanan. But it was and then madness kind of descended on the city, and the media was paying up to $250,000 for a picture of either Versace or Cunanan in the ME's office, and they were hanging from windows at the ME's office, and the media was ahead of the police in a lot of areas, interviewing victims and witnesses, and it was just a big circus at the time.
And do you not think it's scary for the media to be ahead of the police in terms of interfering with investigation?
Oh, they interfered with a couple of them. It was a couple of times. There was one hotel, actually, where Cunanan had stayed. This is after Versace was dead, but before we had found Cunanan, because it was 8 days had elapsed after Versace was shot, before Cunanan killed himself. And so this period of time, we were looking for him. And he had been living at a hotel on Miami Beach, and our detectives had spoken with the hotel owner and whatnot. Well, the hotel owner held back a few things and called the media, and then called us back like a day later, and they went there after the media had been in the room and had videotaped the hairbrush with Cunanan's hair on it. The books that he had gotten from, taken out from the local library, had been in the room where Cunanan had stayed, and videotaped the whole thing with their cameras. And so we arrived, I speak in the collective, I mean all of law enforcement, but FDLE and the Beach arrived, and to a circus already there, and sort of blindsided by the media cameras, like, what do you think? Because now we found that all this stuff that Cunanan left behind.
Right, what a mess.
Yeah, so it was not just, it wasn't that the police were slow. It's everybody wanted their 5 minutes of fame, and at any price. So we had a lot of prank phone calls. We had a lot of people calling in, doing sightings, and some have been substantiated after the fact, and some turned out to be nothing but hoaxes. But I think they got 10,000 leads in one week that he was missing. And so it was just a very strange time. So in my book, actually, I borrowed a little bit of that media circus, and I put it in because the book involves a series of serial killings that are occurring in Miami. And I borrowed the media circus that surrounded the Cunanan Versace period of time, and put it in this. A little flavor of how crazy it kind of is to have a microphone in your face every 2 seconds.
Right, right. And you thought we were just going to talk about books today. Whatever. All right, you majored in communications before law school. How has that helped you in your role as prosecutor and author?
Well, I think the word communications kind of says it all. It makes you a well-rounded person and able to speak in front of a lot of people and be able to articulate and communicate. And so in that endeavor, I took a couple of creative writing courses, and I majored in pre-law too, so it helped me learn how to formulate my thoughts and my ideas and communicate them better as a lawyer.
Very important.
Yeah, and actually what I originally had planned on doing, if I had my way, was to be an actress. Yeah, I know you're laughing, but
I'm
thought,
not.
Don't ask me why, but I really thought that I was too lazy to go to the auditions, so I thought it would be easier to go to law school. And I don't know where brain came up with that idea, so I signed up for the war for 3 years, and then I thought, wow, you must be an idiot. Auditions would have been a piece of cake compared to this, but I thought that it would be something that I could always have with me, a law degree, and if I chose to pursue acting or the entertainment industry, perhaps as a lawyer or even as an actress, I could always have a law degree behind me to make sure that I could feed myself and my family.
Well, let's just see how that all panned out. Your movie rights have just been bought up. You wrote the screenplay.
Yes.
I think you can probably have a part in that.
I'm trying. I'm
You deserve a
trying.
part in
I'm
that.
trying. And, you know, hopefully they'll stick me in, perhaps in one of the scenes as a juror, and I can weep and then smile at my mother on the screen.
It's only fair.
Yes.
And why did you decide to become prosecutor as opposed to defense attorney or corporate lawyer?
You know, once there's certain type of people or a certain type of person who can be a prosecutor. It's not for everybody, but for me, once I stepped foot in a criminal courtroom, I was an intern with the Brooklyn DA's office with the judge, and then with the Queens DA's office. Once you step foot into a criminal courtroom, there was no turning back for me, and everything else just seemed insignificant. I don't know if that's a good word for it, but that's what it seemed like to me. It just didn't capture my attention. And I couldn't, a slip and fall didn't seem as important as putting somebody behind bars for what they'd done. And so it kind of gave my life a purpose at that point. And I was, having wanted to be an actress, I borrowed that to become a trial attorney, because that's really where I fell in love with the courtroom. And being an actress kind of gave me a feeling for how that was to communicate to a jury. It's very theatrical. You as the prosecutor, you are what the jury hears. You present the evidence to them, but may the best lawyer win in a lot of instances.
And the one who communicates best shall win.
That's it. And the one who can tell the story. You know, it's one thing to say a few words, and it's another thing to tell a story. And that's really what you do as a lawyer. And as a prosecutor, I could never be a defense attorney. Not that I don't think that they do a valuable job, because certainly if I was ever in trouble with the law, I want to hire the best. But it's not in it for me to be one. I've always been on the side of law enforcement, and you know, it wasn't such a quantum leap to leave being a prosecutor to become a legal advisor, because I was going on, quote unquote, the same team that I had worked with at the state attorney's office. It was just working with the police who helped me get the cases when I was a prosecutor.
Right.
It's a different type of role, but.
All right, I only know about the Florida Department of Law Enforcement from a behavioral profiler named Dale Hinneman on TV.
Yes.
Do you know Body of Evidence?
Dale.
You know Dale?
Yes, I do.
Have you ever thought about doing one of those court TV things?
I guess, you know, I would pursue that now. I hadn't thought of it before, but if the opportunity presented
We
itself.
love that. We love that. All right, do you think those shows do more harm than good?
No, I think it's great. I think everybody should open up a courtroom, and people should walk through it and see how the system works. You know, it's a system that all of us at one time or another are going to be called to duty to go listen to as a juror.
True.
And there's so many people who come up and say, "Oh, I've been called for jury duty. I don't want to do it." And I really think, honestly, as a citizen, it's your duty to do it. And I also think it's very exciting if you have an opportunity. Not all cases end up becoming 3-week or 4-week murder trials. Sometimes you can go in and do a possession case or something in a few days, but it's really something that you should try, or as a member of society, you really owe it to the system to be in there to let the system work. And I think it's very exciting if you have an opportunity to do it.
Kind of like voting.
Kind of like voting.
Yeah. Your bio sheet said that you received, if you don't recognize this quote, don't worry about it, because I know you've heard, there's been lots written, and it's like, where'd that come from? But it said that you received a sobering education in the fine line that exists between love and hate, and just how much damage can be done when one chooses to cross that line. Do you remember the reference about that?
Yes, because actually I think that quote is me. And I think I said that to my publisher and to a couple of news agencies. I used to work domestic violence as a prosecutor. I did a special assignment to the domestic violence unit. And I did see, you know, there is a fine line between love and hate, and when people cross it, they can be brutal. And some of the worst cases that I saw, unfortunately, came out of domestics.
That do anything to you? I mean, you see that every day and deal with it. It's like police doing it. That does something to them. Did you have a hard time washing that out of the brain?
It makes that domestic violence makes me very sad, actually, because I feel a lot of people are trapped in it, and to see them go back into it, you don't feel as much vindication as you do when it's a stranger that you can help lock up and away from society. And domestics, sometimes the victim doesn't recognize that they're a victim, and that makes it very tragic.
This is a big question, but maybe there's a simple answer to it. You interned at Queens and Brooklyn District Attorney's offices before going to Florida under Janet Reno. How did those two experiences differ, or did they?
Well, Brooklyn, I actually interned for a criminal court judge, and then in Queens, I interned in the misdemeanor county court section when I was in I think my second year of law school. And then going to Miami. Well, the judicial system in Miami versus New York is completely different. I like to say justice in Florida is southern and swift. And I mean that in a good sense, which is why I went down. In New York, everybody is indicted for the most part. And that's actually how all felonies have to be indicted. And it's not that difficult to indict, but it just prolongs the case. And I've seen my friends try cases, the cocaine possession, that would take them a week or 2 weeks, and in Florida, we could get 2 of those done in a day.
That's good news.
Yeah, it is good news, actually. I mean, I think it's better when the system works fast. And so in Florida, we handle things by information. So instead of indictment, where you have to go before a grand jury and present evidence, and then they come back and tell you if you can file a case, the prosecutor in Florida makes the decision to file the case. And so after a defendant is arrested by the police, we have 21 days in which the police come in and your witnesses come in, and I swear them in, and they tell me what happened. Victims will come in, witnesses, cops, and you swear them in, and you find out exactly what happened, and then you determine what charges, formal charges, are going to be filed by information. And then it doesn't get stuck. You're not stuck with charge. I mean, you control the case more, and it's more of a responsibility. But in the same token, you can take the case all the way through from its inception until a verdict.
So if they were doing Florida law and order, the processes would be just a little bit different than New York law and order.
Yes, you would see more people in Sam Waterson's office as opposed to in front of a grand jury.
That's interesting. I love that.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know that actually. I never even took the New York bar, to be perfectly honest. I got a job offer from the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. And came in March in my last year of law school, and we had just gotten married, my husband and I, and unfortunately I had coaxed him into moving into this apartment in Queens that had wooden ceilings above us and a baby in a walker, and this baby walked. Oh boy, it walked. It must have been insomniac too, because it walked day and night over my poor husband's head, and he consented to renting this on the day after his bachelor party. So he was really in no position to sign on the dotted line, but I made him do it anyway.
Him, girl.
So when the job offer came from Miami, 2 months later, after this kid had walked over his head, it came literally with a brochure of people yachting and boating and jet skiing, because I think help was hard to find down in crime-infested Miami at the time. Man. And so he opened it up and he said, "Jillian, we're going to Miami." And and I didn't even take the New York bar, I just took the Florida bar.
Well, then you only had to do one of them.
Yeah, Florida's mean. They don't have reciprocity with other states. So like New York and other bars, you can wave into other states if you score high enough. Florida won't let you wave in.
What is it about crime in Florida? I think people do not understand that crime in Miami is just unbelievable. And if it wasn't for that reporter, what's her name? Oh gosh, I'll never figure it out. Anyway, she wrote a book about the things going on down there, and I was just
Edna Buchanan?
Yes!
There you go.
Oh my gosh. And you're just like, oh my goodness. But crime in Florida is really wild.
Well, it is a sunshine state, and I guess criminals
weather.
want to stay warm, so we do attract them. I don't want to make it sound like Miami is like, a smoldering pit of crime, because it's really not.
It's a lovely city.
It's a beautiful city. It's wild. It's dynamic, and it's like a boiling pot or a melting pot of people, just like New York and LA and Chicago. And when you have all those different people living in close proximity, you're going to attract crime. And it was great job security.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I got hired in a recession, so it was really great job security.
Well, and psychologists do say if the weather's warm, there's more crime. It's settled by statistics, and there you go. Well, you have worked for not only the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, but the FBI, the CIA, the Secret Service. Can you talk in general terms about some of those cases? Maybe just something that pops right up to your head?
Well, we worked South Florida Impact, which is it's a multi-agency task force that FDLE belongs to, with several different agencies, including U.S. Customs and the Secret Service, and we target money launderers and money laundering and drug trafficking. So those sort of cases that I had worked, and then the FBI on fugitives who had escaped from jail. We worked on a bunch of cases with the FBI on that, and then child pornography cases. We work in tandem with U.S. Postal, and
Thank God.
yeah, those are hard. Those are awful.
Yeah. Well, all right. When did you know that you wanted to write? Because there's actress, lawyer, and now...
Here you go, right?
Now,
What's the progression? How do we get from A to B? I don't know if I ever knew I wanted to write, to be perfectly honest. I actually, working as a prosecutor and coming in contact with victims on a daily basis, and as you move up the system, as I said, Southern and Swift, within a year I was doing felonies, and they throw you into the fire, and you meet lots of victims. And first it's burglaries and grand thefts, and then you move up, and I moved on to a serial rape case that I was trying with another prosecutor. And there were 7 young girls between the ages of 11 and 19 who had been raped by this guy dubbed the Miami Rapist, and he was on the lam for a while, and we finally caught him. And we brought in, my friend who I was prosecuting it with, we brought in all these victims to determine which case would be the one that we're going to try, which one would be the best to present to the jury. And so I listened to them all, and all of their stories were different, but yet they were all eerily the same.
There was a connecting.
They were all victims, and the more you listen to them, and in particular the case that we chose to do, it was 2 sisters walking home, and he popped out of the bushes. He was a young guy himself, about 20, and he popped out of the bushes with a gun, and he forced him behind the building, and he raped one, but he made the other watch. And I think that's where it first started to think, I realized how cruel people can be.
Well, you're reliving that as they're telling it.
Well, you're listening to them, and it's funny because the victim in that case, the one who was actually raped, she could talk and tell the jury what happened, and she was fine on the stand, but it was the sister who was catatonic. She couldn't talk. It had affected her.
Wow.
Almost worse than the first one. So that's when I first started to move up and deal with a lot of victims, and they never leave you, never, none of them. And I started to think, what if you could turn the tables? What if the persecuted became the prosecutor? Would they choose justice, or would it be revenge? And I just sort of started thinking about it, and I actually started seeing scenes in my head, and I thought it would make a great movie. So when you say, what made me start writing, it wasn't that I've always had a dream to be a writer, but I saw it in my head, and I really thought it would be a great movie. And then I read a book that said, there's so many unsolicited screenplays out there. If you're going to try your luck, you should try it as a novel and then adapt it as a screenplay. And then you'd have 2 mediums if you wanted to try and sell something. So I said, oh, that's good. And so I said, well, maybe I'll try it as a book. And I started to write a couple of chapters, and I wrote something that I would like to read myself. So
absolutely,
I read like John Grisham and James Patterson and Thomas Harris. And so I started to write it, a couple of chapters here or there. Well, I had young children at the time. They are still young. They're 6 and 8 now.
Right.
And I started to write it as a book, and that's when I realized how much I liked writing. It's actually after I started the project, because I found myself being drawn back to it at 11 o'clock at night, 2 in the morning, whatever it was. I was drawn back to finish a chapter and get this done and move to the next one. And I would be sitting there stirring the sauce on the stove, and I'd say, "Oh, that's a great idea," and I would run down and I'd type it out. So the love of writing kind of developed after the project started.
But see, that's how writers' minds work. Other people go along and they observe life and they go, yes, that's this and that's that. And a writer goes, oh, whoa, what if? That's really true. That's how the thing starts.
Old and calculated, I guess.
Well, I don't know about that, but they're imaginative, we'll say that. Was it hard to keep yourself from becoming too technical when it came to legal language?
No, because I don't like to listen to technical legal language. I mean, I hear it, legalese is, it kills most lawyers too. So when I wanted to explain something in the book, I didn't want to be bored by writing it, and I certainly didn't want people to be bored by reading it. So I put it in language that I would want to hear it in, and that would make it simple and sweet, and that's really what it is.
And did you find that your editor agreed with that?
Yes, actually nothing was changed in the book. I was very fortunate.
Oh,
so
my
they've
goodness.
pretty much kept it word for word.
That is remarkable.
Yeah, I've been very lucky that way, and yeah,
Cool.
I've been lucky.
Well, how did you make contact with a publisher, and did you do it before or after you had written?
Actually, I waited to finish the book before I went and sought an agent, because I know a lot of people belong to groups and they like to have feedback on their writing, and it's not that I'm adverse to criticism, but I had the idea in my head and I saw it from the beginning to the end. And if you give half a story to 5 different people, you will get 5 to 20 different endings. I mean, everybody's got a different way that they can see something go. And I didn't want everybody to tell me which way it should go. I wanted to see if it would play out the way I saw it in my head, if it would work on paper. So I waited till I finished it before I said, you know what, if they don't like it, if someone doesn't like it, then they can criticize it when it's done, when I know that I did it the way I wanted. So I kind of put horse blinders on and I just wrote it and finished it. And then I got an awesome agent. And
Now, how did you do that? Because you just don't phone up an agent and get on board. You can't even find one to phone. So how'd you do that?
It's a very strange thing. When I decided I was working and trying to write this book, and I had originally, when I was a prosecutor, I started to write a chapter or two, and then I got hired at the state attorney's office. At the FDLE, and they lied to me and they said, oh, it's a 9-to-5 job, and they lied. I was the only legal attorney, and so when a search warrant had to come out at 2 a.m, guess who they called? And so it was too late at this point. I already signed up for the war, so I stayed with them. But it was such a job, I tell you that, because I couldn't work and end it at 5 and pick up the kids and make dinner and then write, like David Kelly did until the wee hours of the morning. I would be called out. It was just too demanding on my time. So I decided to actually quit my job and to write it. And so when I decided, my husband, who's an awesome, awesome individual, and I wish you could meet him, he used to play baseball for St. Louis in the farm system, and he blew out his rotator cuff, and unfortunately it ended his career. But he said to me at this point, when he knew I was kind of struggling, and I think he was actually frightened of the ideas that I had in my head, and he thought of it more as therapy, like, put them on paper. He said to me, look, I had a chance to follow my dream, and you should have a chance to follow yours. I mean, everybody should, and they don't have the opportunity, but we should give you the opportunity. Very noble conversation. Now, if I was making 6 figures as a corporate attorney, would we have had that conversation? I don't know. But he's a sweetheart, and he said that, and I took him up on it. So when I sat down to write this, the first thing I did is I said, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm going to be a writer. I have to get writer books so that my library has books that writers would have. So I went to the bookstore and I went to the writing section, and I'm like, oh, okay, all writers have Writers Market books. So I bought a Writers Market, and all writers have literary agent guides, and I bought that. And then there was a book there, and it was called Get Published, Get Produced, by Peter J. Miller, America's #1 literary agent. And it had a picture of a guy sitting on a desk and doing that. So I looked at the cover and I said, ooh, it's America's #1 literary agent. I'll get this book. So I bought this book, and this becomes a very funny story later. So I bought the book and I put it on the shelf with my other 2 books. And I'm like, okay, I'm a writer now, because this is what writers have in their bookstores or in their cases. So I wrote my book, and it took me about a year to write, and now I was done, and now it's time to find an agent. So I go back to my handy-dandy guide to literary agents, and I look up Peter J. Miller, America's #1 literary agent. And he's not in there.
He's the only one that thinks he's #1.
And so I'm like, I wonder why. And I look at Writer's Marketplace, and he's not in there either. So I wind up finding an agent, coincidentally. Actually, my mother, this is a very funny mother story. My mother had been on a train with a guy she went to college with, and they were chatting, and he said, "Oh, you always have such great stories. I've got a daughter. She's an editor at this publishing house," which was not my house, by the way. And my mother goes, "Oh, I got a daughter who wants to be a writer." And so they start talking, like, and if I hadn't been married and she had been a he, we probably would have been put together on a blind date. But anyway, she apparently had been probably deluged by sending over writers' names by her father. And so I sent over, she asked me to send a synopsis, and I did, and she really liked it. And then I was about 5 months into the book, and then she said, send me what you have. So I sent her 19 chapters, and she called, and she said, "Oh, this is great. Can you make a series? Can it be this? Can it be that?" I'm like, "It can be anything you want it to be." So when can it be done? And blah, blah, blah. And long story short is I met her months later in New York for a drink, and I didn't give her any other pieces of the book for that precise reason that I told you. And she said to me in New York, "We don't work with unrepresented authors, so you need to get an agent." And she gave me a list of 8 agents that she had worked with. So when I was done with the book, I let her know, I'm done with the book, I'm going to query, because that's what the Writer's Market book said, you have to query. So I had written down a nice query letter, and she said, "Well, let me tell them that it's coming." And then she wrote back and said, 3 say just send the manuscript. So right there I had like a nose in the door, thanks to my mother. And
oh, Mom.
She's a funny woman. She won't be outdone. She's there's probably people here sent tonight by my mother. She's got spies. But anyway, so I wound up sending it out, and those 3 liked it, and they called, and then from there, I wound up finding my agent, who's an awesome agent. And then I said to my agent, and all these other agents that I was chatting with, I said, "Do you know Peter Miller, America's #1 literary agent?" And everybody said, "No, who's that?"
Oh,
I'm like, "But he's America's #1 literary agent, and I want you to know I have not found him yet. But I am single-handedly going to launch him on the bestseller list because I've been telling everybody that story."
Your muse, honey.
They're going to rush out and buy his book.
I've got to ask you one question. All right, this killer in one of the first scenes is outside of Chloe's window, and he's doing heinous things. I'm not telling you. That scene was so hard to read that I thought to myself, how did she ever get past the grossness of that scene? Has to be a quick answer because we're almost out of time.
Okay. Here's the thing. I didn't write it to be brutal. I didn't write it to do anything else. But I wrote it to show the victim's perspective.
Okay. Well, all right. Retribution is a unique thriller that will make it hard for you to put down the book to go to the bathroom. At least it was for me. And you will never guess who the killer is at the end. This book delivers good suspense and characters you will love and hate. Jilliane, thanks for your book, Retribution.
Thanks so much
and for coming today.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm Susan Gray, and we'll see you again for the next edition of Book Talk.
You're watching the Library Channel, a broadcast service of the Memphis Public Libraries and the City of Memphis.